instead of trash talking it. How about enjoying the storyline and the creativity and comedy of it? We don't need your prepubescent sounding ass commentary. Fuck it, I'll say it. You sound like a faggot trying to suck a good dick, bitch.
Why the fuck are your reviews 45 minutes long? You could have easily went in depth about the comic, but nope, you have to pull a Sargon on us for that sweet ad revenue.
So let's talk about love. What is love? Baby, don't hurt me. No more. No, but seriously, what is it? Looking it up in the dictionary, it is an intense feeling of deep affection. Now, I'm sure everyone knows what love between two people is. Yes, even you, teenage kid who thinks they're ever so grimdark. Yes, you know what love is too. But what is love for, say, art, writing and making comics, and who are we to determine whether you love something or not? The answer is we can't really determine it, but we can say what we feel or think. The last time I talked about the love for one's craft, I was talking about Balls to That, and how you could feel that Luke McKay was loving the stuff he did. You could tell he was having fun with the pages, the designs and the jokes. And you could tell that by the wacky poses and situations he'd put them in, and how much extra he'd put into the comic. His characters wouldn't just be standing and talking, but usually be doing other things while talking. It really feel like you were peeking inside their life for just a brief moment.
With Luke it feels more like, oh, I can add this, and this, and this, rather than, oh no, the deadline is coming up, which to me screams love.
You know we can't talk about this without also talking about the opposite end of the spectrum. That being not loving your work. Again, you can't say this with certainty, but you can feel it, and that alone can become a problem for you as a creator when your audience can tell that you don't give a shit. And just before I start calling people out, I'm gonna even the playing field and actually call myself out. Look at my Girls with Slingshots review from Season 1, my Looking for Group review from Season 3, my 2 Count review from Season 2, or heck even my House Pets review from this very season. I will never suggest those 4 videos, most of all because of their shitty quality, but also because I didn't really put that much care into the videos. Now, whether or not that showed, I don't know, but when I go through them I can definitely tell I was just trying to put out a video because it'd been such a long time since I last put out a video, and I felt I owed it to you guys. So, I'm not innocent of this either, I just want you to remember that. So now, let's hit some low-hanging fruit, shall we? What does Nick Simmons, Jackie Diaz, and Leoian have in common? Well, obviously they have all been caught tracing, and that in and of itself is to me a clear indicator of not loving your work. Like, you didn't even bother learning how to draw to actually draw your thing, you just copied it. This same thing can be said about Lanouche, who made Yaoi High, who wouldn't do backgrounds but would instead use real photos. Speaking of backgrounds, the same thing can be said about Godai, who would use pre-made assets for his backgrounds or even pictures from the internet and not alter them in the slightest. I also feel that Philip Brown clearly showed a lack of love for his project with how his characters will just be standing there with their arms folded or down their sides and talk and explain verbally about everything they do.
Now, I'm not saying these people don't love their crafts. In fact, we know at least one of the before mentioned people is obsessed with their comic to an almost scary degree. I'm just saying that these are the feelings that I personally get when I look at this as a normal reader.
Many people have contacted me about all sorts of ideas and pitches for stories, and while that is awesome, every time I see the same person pitch a new idea, it gets incredibly disheartening. Quoting Bonitas here, everyone can make a story. Adding to Bonitas here, but not everyone can make a good one. And the reason for that tends to be because people are so flippant with their work. They've barely given birth to this new and exciting story, right for them to dig into and work with, till they have done it again, and now the original idea has just kind of been left at the roadside cause fuck your old idea, this new one has boobs and guns in it. Now, does this mean you can't love several projects at once? Absolutely not, but I will say however that there's evidence that it is hard. Philip Brown has several comics under his belt and he's working on at once, and so does Godai, and looking at their comics, as we've seen them up to now, you can't help but really get the feeling that these people stopped caring as much. Their attention is in some other comic right now. Now they were simply just things that put food on the table and a deadline. It isn't just quote unquote amateur comic creators who have this problem. Look at Tide Kubo and Bleach. Look at how much love, affection and creativity there is till Rukia is saved. And then it had to keep going, and you can tell how Tide Kubo just didn't care anymore. The backgrounds disappeared, the designs got boring, and the shots got kinda mundane for a guy who dared to do crazy shit earlier.
Love for your project is a lot like it is for a person. It will have its ups, it will have its downs, and no matter how sexy or exciting this new thing is, if you stick with the original thing, it's because you love it.
Am I thinking any less about the people who lose their love and passion for their comics then? Absolutely not. It's hard to keep being insanely invested in something, especially when it becomes a job or something you have to do. I'm just saying that when you can look at something and can tell that there's love and passion put into it, it hits you and you as an audience can feel it, and you're ready to cut a lot of slack to the person if you can tell they enjoyed themselves or really tried. Like, I don't like Yoko Taro as a game director, and even less as a writer, but I adore the guy for how much he genuinely cares about his work. He doesn't care enough for it to fix the billion plot holes and inconsistencies and contrivances in his games, but you cannot look at the guy or his games and not see a guy who loves what he's doing. So, what's all this set up for? Well, obviously, today's comic is a comic where you can look at any and all of the comics artist's art and you can tell that here is a guy who loves what he's doing. I'm talking about the webcomic Hammer by Jay Oden.
Now, full disclosure, because you guys know I want to be 100% transparent, Jay did some art for me back in the day, some really awesome art in fact, but that is in no shape or form going to change my opinion of the comic. You guys should know by now that I think that the best thing you can do to any content creator is be 100% honest about your thoughts and opinions. So you don't end up with what people tend to do in their little heart boxes where, oh, you made a new character with red hair and heterochroma iridium? You're such a good OC creator! Yes you are! Yes you are! Go on, Jimmy! You're the best!
Meet Jay Oden, a comic creator from New Orleans, Louisiana. Jay started drawing when he was 6 years old and self-published his first book when he was 17 years old in high school. After this, his passion for comic creation spurred him on to make more, and as of such he eventually joined one company after the other making comics for them. I've also been told a lot of juicy stuff about the future, but I promise to keep that under wraps. So let's just say that Jay isn't exactly a guy who is known for sitting back and relaxing. Also, I just want to give a huge thanks to Jay, who actually sent me the comic files himself, cause as awesome as Webtoon is to read comics on, I can't download the pages. So it'd be a pretty boring video if you guys just had to see a blank screen with me talking over it. So good job, Jay. You saved your own review.
So if you don't want a review of your comic, this is where you post them. Until I find a way to download them, of course. Or you can just write me and say, hey Riiser, do you mind not being a shitlord to my comic? Like, I'm open for those things. Who would have thought?
Okay, so let's get into Hammer. Hammer is a fantasy action comic written much in the same vein as a shonen manga is, and no, Jay doesn't call it a manga, like the idiots who wrote the Two Kinds Wiki did about Two Kinds. It's been so many years and that still bothers me. But yeah, Hammer follows the adventures of Stud Hammer, yes, a dumbass name, but hey, it's for kids, as he explores his newly garnered powers of being able to transform his limbs into hammers. Growing up without a mother and his dad always out adventuring, Stud is left a lot to his own devices. He doesn't really have any friends, and I gotta admit I kinda liked how that wasn't just because those friends were huge assholes, which they are, but because, well, Stud's a freaking weird ass kid. And he even knows this too. And honestly, I kinda like that Stud's weird, and he's intentionally weird. There's not this weird thing that a lot of creators do where they are making someone weird and off and then go, no, but that's just him being endearing, or whatever, and the people around the character just kind of hand wave how weird they are away.
Like, imagine a guy who shows up at every social gathering wearing an adult diaper on top of their clothes, talks in whimsical rhymes, actually likes Kingdom Hearts, and smells like a mixture of piss and throw up in a sewer. You're not just gonna go, oh, that's just Jimmy. He's so nice. Yeah, he sure is something.
Right off the bat, there are two things that I want to cover. First and foremost is that the prologue of this comic is goddamn abysmal.
What? Just because the person in question actually asked me to review the comic, you thought I was gonna be all nice about it?
Don't get me wrong, the prologue is for all intents and purposes a good prologue in terms of introducing people to the world this comic is taking place in. It doesn't introduce their character's name, however, and the biggest flaw is its pacing and framing. Stud's been told that when he reaches the age of 13 he'll unlock his powers. How his dad knows this, why Stud is so quick to believe something so out there, and why he's so upset about what most people would consider a lie not coming true is anyone's guess. But 6 pages into the comic, and for reference, that's 6 frames after him complaining about his lack of powers, he just magically finds those powers. There's no emotional build-up, we don't see Stud play around with various things that may summon his powers, and we don't get an insight into how he makes his powers come out. Now, I get it. Some of us just wants to give the guy some power so we can start seeing him tearing shit up. But when he's this distraught about not having powers, when the prologue is there to set the setting, having Stud try various things to summon his powers would work as a great introduction of him as a character, and would help shape the world. Cause I'll be real with you guys here, when I first read this prologue, the way it was introduced, it made me think that everyone in the comics universe had superpowers. I did this because the comic set it up like it's a great injustice that Stud doesn't have his powers from the get-go, and then when he does get them, it's kind of a hand-wave feeling. Like, he just gets them and...
I think I've said it before, but the less emphasis you give to something alien to the reader, the more normal it is going to seem for the people within the comics universe.
There's also a thing that I can't really blame people for doing, and I'm not gonna bash this comic for it, but when making a prologue, you will find many people who will claim that the prologue is a separate introductory section. Meaning that this is something you can do without, and it's just there to give some depth and extra meat to the world building. The reason I phrase it like this is because even in the dictionary it says that it's a separate piece, but many other places it's just described as an opening that establishes context and background details. So I honestly don't know whether it has to be separate or not. Just know that I will always see them as a separate thing, and if it was indeed a separate thing, the rest of the comic doesn't make sense without the prologue.
Which kind of makes it all weirder when you just jump into the comic without the context of the prologue, and all of a sudden there's just a kid who can turn his hands into hammers.
The prologue of Hammer feels mostly like it's supposed to be read like a gag or strip comic where you are not supposed to question anything. Kind of in the same vein as when a ninja just shows up in Mega Tokyo to fight Puro and Largo for a Japanese visa in Mortal Kombat. You know, those things that are just a gag so you can kind of suspend your disbelief and just go with things. The problem with these things is that, like in Mega Tokyo, the moment you start adding serious elements to these things, you have to take everything about these elements as a serious thing. And once something becomes serious, you have to start being allowed to ask questions. So when you first read Hammer's prologue, you have a lot of fun with it actually. Seeing Stud struggle with his newfound abilities and how they get in the way of stuff as simple as opening doors, and seeing Stud dealing with this stuff is really cute and endearing and helps building his character. But the moment it starts getting serious, it kinda lost me a little, cause then I suddenly had to start asking questions and, well, you saw earlier what that did to the whole thing about getting powers alone.
I've said it before, and I'll happily say it as many times as I have to, because it cannot be overstated how important the intro to a webcomic is. We live in a world where there are 1,000,002 webcomics out there, and you have to stand out somehow. If you are at an all-you-can-eat buffet, you're not gonna go for the thing that looks like a cat just puked it up. First impressions are so important, especially when you have to sell something, and when you're making a webcomic, you have to sell the webcomic to the reader.
The other thing I wanted to get out of the way is not by any imagination a bad thing. In fact, it's one of those things that I find really cute and interesting, which is that holy hell, when reading this comic, can you tell that Jay likes One Piece? I don't really care all that much for the manga, but even I can appreciate just the sheer wacky and heavy feeling you get from both One Piece and Hammer. Jay's writing mimics the same feeling you get when reading One Piece, where the characters have this go-get-em attitude that just makes you smile and cheer for them. Sure, they get sad and distressed, but seeing them just bounce back and trying their best and keeping their chin up is honestly a really heartwarming thing. Also, there's, the whole thing about transforming your limbs into objects and hitting people with them.
But yeah, the prologue could use a lot of work, if not be completely redone from scratch. Especially seeing it's what has to sell the comic, but also establish for the reader what to expect from the rest of the comic.
As for the actual comic, there is a massive, and I do mean massive, leap in quality. Everything feels more well-paced, it feels better written, and heck, it also looks a million times better, but we'll get back to that. Basically, now that Stud has found his powers, he wishes to use these powers to impress the local town's kids enough to let him join their gang. Things don't work out, however, as the kids in town are strangely sensible and actually laugh at Stud's adventurous spirit, rather than wanting a safe and steady job. Like I said before, the comic and its characters fully acknowledge that Stud is a freaking weirdo, and it actually serves to make us feel extra bad for Stud. Failing to impress the kids, Stud returns home to his empty house where Stud monologues to himself, and where it before just felt like a dumb crutch to convey information, we have told that the reason that he talks so much to himself, even something brought up by the kids earlier, is cause the dude is lonely. There's no one to come home and talk to, and so he talks to himself. I don't know, that just really hit home with me. Just because here's this thing you're kinda disliking the guy for, and you're actively writing notes about how overly done it is, and then Jay just flips it on its head to the point where you're not only understanding the guy for doing it, but feel bad for him because he needs to do it.
And just like that, with a little clever writing, suddenly Jay gets a free pass on something that would normally annoy me. It just goes to show that something isn't inherently bad, as long as you can find a good way of doing it.
Stud goes to his dad's study where he finds his dad's book that describes the adventures of Dee and David, but also mentions the name of Tara, the same name as Stud's mother. Anyway, to not spoil the whole thing, one thing leads to another, and bam, boom, bada bing, suddenly Stud is pulled into this book, and the adventure can begin for real. Stud is transferred to a magical world inside the book where the stage is immediately set, where two dragons are fighting one another, and in the ocean, fish are talking to government officials trying to solve a felony case involving a whale, the murder of a king, and a shark with a power weapon.
Holy shit!
Yeah, things get crazy in Hammer, and it's actually a pretty interesting ride through most of it. Jay displays a knowledge of how to amp up the pace and then bring it back down when it needs to. Sometimes, however, it kind of feels like events happen for the sake of having stuff happen, like Stuff will be talking to a dude and then all of a sudden Stud's life will be in danger, but then it'll get resolved almost immediately and Stud and the dude will return to what they were talking about earlier. It kind of feels like Jay didn't write a script or anything for Hammer before thumbnailing it, which is a little unfortunate. As a whole, I think the writing in Hammer could use some work. I like its pace and some of the stuff it does, but ultimately I just kind of found the story a little boring. There were a lot of agency I didn't really feel, so much so that I thought the Hammerhead Shark Steel that we see at one point wasn't more than your average thug. And just for reference, he turns out to be a massive villain. It was also a little disheartening to see that the comic wouldn't shut up a lot of the time. Everyone is giving exposition so often, albeit a lot better than Unsounded, and it honestly had this feeling of your typical shonen manga. And it honestly wouldn't bother me as much if it wasn't because at the beginning Jay showed he could easily tell a story by simply showing stuff. The frames in which Stud is walking through his home all alone and there's no sound effects or voice bubbles really helped giving the sense of loneliness and sadness that the scene had.
What is it I always say? Brevity is the soul of wit. Maybe that's why my videos have become so fucking long!
Ultimately, the writing of Hammer is good, if not a little hit and miss sometimes. The characters all get time to shine and are nice and varied, and the story is in its simplicity actually cute and easy to understand and follow. It's clear that Hammer is a labor of love, but also a lot of knowledge some places, but there are the finer details where it just kinda slips up.
It's like the best steak ever, but it's been cooked to the point where it is well done. Yes, if you like well done steak, then you're wrong. It's just that simple. I want to marry this art. I think Beyonce said it the best, where if you like it, then you should put a ring on it. And my god, do I want to just get on my knees and...
All the single furries, all the single furries, all the single furries, all the single furries.
Who?
I love Jay Oden's art. Love it with a capital L and equally as big O-V and E. There's passion, there's heart, there's movement and unique designs. Like if you can look at Jay's art and not feel happy, you're just wrong or actively trying to prove me wrong. There's people out there like that. Whether it's his unique art style, his strong colors, his wild emotes, or just how much he plays with the various scenes, I don't know, but there's no doubt in my mind that Jay enjoys what he's doing.
It's not the best comic art in the world, but I don't recall the last time I just thoroughly enjoyed the art as much as I did here.
First of all, I want to talk about Jay's designs. They're all, with a single exception, so simple, yet so unique, that you just have to glance at a page and you'll immediately be able to tell who's who. Everyone has their own unique color palette, their own unique anatomy, and just an overall style to them that really helps set them apart when a bunch of stuff is going on. I think the last comic I read that had that was Cloud Scratcher, and it just speaks volumes when a character can stand out like that without being a clusterfuck like this. In an action comic, I'd say this kind of stuff is key. You'll also find it in Dreamkeepers. The reason why this is so important is because a lot of shit is going on, and so you want to be able to pick out who's who and where they are. This is another reason why the main character of any action movie where people tend to wear helmets doesn't wear a helmet. Well, that and they obviously need to show off the actor's face.
That's also why it's red versus blue or black versus white. And not, those weird colors that only women think are worlds apart. Like, my girlfriend would kill me if I called this white. This is eggshell mint or some shit.
Jay also displays an impeccable knowledge about when to use backgrounds and when not to. With Stud literally being transported into a different world, Jay knows just how important it is to set the stage for the readers when showing off the new world. He also understands that, say, when Start feels small and insignificant and alone, to show the full background, to show just how alone and insignificant he is in the environment he's in. Jay understands to show a lot with his imagery, and just the way he frames stuff, which apparently, not common knowledge to everyone, is key when making a comic.
Lord knows how many times we've seen a comic where it's actually just a book with a few pictures attached to it.
I talked about Cloud Scratcher earlier, and I just want to bring that up again real quick, cause in my review of that I mentioned how some of the shots were a little stale. Now, look at this door here being thrown. And here, now look at this dude getting thrown. You get much more of a feeling of power and velocity from this picture from Hammer. And it's probably due to the added effects and how the sound effects almost seem like they're being shook by the collision as well. I don't know, I just wanted to bring that up. But yeah, Jay's action scenes are really good. There's a good sense of movement and you almost always know what's going on in the scene, which is pretty impressive considering how alien a lot of it is. I will say though that this is ruined by two things. Two things I am kinda shocked that as good as an artist as Jay is, didn't notice himself.
Bite the pillow, Jay, because I'm going in!
Okay, so, like I said before, Stud is transported to a city underwater where most of the comic up to its current point's action scenes takes place. And that's all fine and dandy and makes for some great locale and funny and charming architecture, but it also causes a certain thing.
Fucking bubbles!
Yep, bubbles. I can literally bitch about anything, can't I? But before I start thinking I'm just nitpicky here, let me explain myself. In every scene that's taking place underwater, with no single exception, there are bubbles. But that's fine to a certain extent. Like these detailed bubbles here, or the bubbles here that shows movement, that's awesome, that's fine, keep those. But there's also these white bubbles, and they are honestly just white circles really. They annoy me more than I can possibly put into words. Cause it's fine when you're establishing, hey, we're underwater, but just look what it does to a frame. It actively removes some of the frame and sometimes to the point where it becomes hard to tell what's going on. I honestly thought they would go away at some point, but nope. They're there and they don't add anything the detailed bubbles don't, but rather detract. Like look here, Stud's supposed to be sparkling here, but because of the bubbles, you can't see what's shine sparks and what's bubbles. I honestly think that maybe Jay added a little too much here for his own good. Like seriously dude, just delete them. It's not like we just suddenly gonna forget we're underwater.
Like who would ever forget where that comic takes place? I mean seriously!
The second thing I'm kinda shocked to see is something I'm sure the comic creators who've paid attention to what I've said about the action comics will probably have picked up on by now. Actually, let me give you guys a second to see if you can catch it. You see it? No? The frames and borders. The layout of a comic says so much about the mindset and tone of a comic, and while Jay manages to do this with what he puts into the frames, he doesn't really seem to do it that much with the actual frame. Even during the most hardcore, hectic and insane battles, the frames will stay consistently vertical or horizontal, only ever so often going diagonal. Everything is so neatly structured, and while that makes it easy to read, it doesn't fully convey the sheer adrenaline that is going on. I only bring this up because Jay seems like he's such a good comic artist that it's kind of weird that he doesn't got this and the bubbles thing from earlier down.
It's like you know how to make the best souffle in the world, but you still kinda struggle with boiling water for spaghetti.
Another thing, and this might be 100% subjective, hey guess what, it's a review, I can do that. I kind of feel the love that Jay has for his comic comes and bites him in the ass sometimes. Cause while I adore the sheer thought and work that Jay puts into the comic, it sometimes feels it's a little too much. Like these pages here for example. Like sure, if you sit down and dissect them for long enough you'll find out what's going on. But this is an action scene. You kinda need to guide my eye to make it so I'm easily able to tell what's going on to go with the flow of the combat. The frame is simply too busy with all these effects and wacky angles that I got no real clue right away with who's who, where who is, and what who is doing.
Jay, I can tell that you love making this comic. I really can. But sometimes you might want to tone it down a little.
Ultimately, the art of Hammer is really solid, but with some weird errors that kinda serves to annoy you as a reader. The designs especially are super on point, and it's really cool to see just how much variation Jay gets out of his art style, both with characters and the area it takes place in. I also think that it's kind of a stroke of genius to put the comic on the water, as having bubbles showing movement as well as it does really works for the comic. Yes, there are flaws, yes they get on your nerves and confuse you, but ultimately, I kinda like the art for its simplicity, colorfulness, and sheer creativity.
There's also one small thing I want to add to this. It's really small, but I just really adored it.
I'm not sure if you can still find these pages, but when I was reading Hammer originally, I came across these behind the scenes pages. Normally I skip them, but for some reason I was strangely drawn to this one, and I'm so happy I did, cause here you got to see all the different art choices that Jay tried going with. The mindset he had when picking, say, Stud's attacks, and how violent it should be for its audience. It was so nice to see that someone actually sat down for once and thought about what he was doing, rather than just making a comic. And trust me, it's not that this is just how Jay draws and figured to make a comic with that art style. No, this dude got range. This dude can draw in many different styles, and he just chose this one for Hammer, cause that's the one that fit. I know this is also something Cody from Cloud Spectre does, or my friend Zach behind Marcus does.
Try and tell him his art looks like Dreamkeeper's. He loves that shit.
First of all, we got Stud Hammer, and
Okay, I need to address this now.
I brought it up in my unsounded review that I really dislike when people had a name that determined their profession or even moral compass ahead of time, and some people wanted to correct me and said that this was how people usually did things back in the day. So if you were a family of Smiths, you'd get the name Smith. It makes sense. The problem is, you kinda misunderstood what I mean. I'm talking when people have names so specific that they can't help but to predict the future. Like, I've compiled a list here, and tell me if any of these could at any point have grown up to be, say, a really good baker. Illidan Stormrage, Garrosh Hellscream, Ner'zhul, Orgrim Doomhammer, Manoroth, Idalas Blackmore, Balthasar, Jaraxxus, Varimafras, Kromgar, Onyxia, Sinestra, Kargaf Bladefist, Chef Voldoon, Zoe Quinn, Deathrock, Gothic, Asef, Corin Direbrew, Morgraine, Kilrock Deadeye, Canifrad Ebenlock, Magafar Grim Totem, Masophet, Orbas Bloodbane, Grieve, Ren Blackhand, Ultraxion.
The point is, it's fucking stupid if you want to be taken seriously. Although a lot of these would be dope rap names, I won't lie.
And yes, some of these names are obviously someone renaming themselves or clan names, but come the fuck on! At least tell me you can see where I'm coming from. Anyway, Stud Hammer, yes, it's a dumb name, but unlike these other names, this name is supposed to be pretty goofy. I mean, for fuck's sake, his dad's name is Tool. You cannot tell me this is supposed to be taken seriously. Anyway, Stud's a good kid. He's lively, energetic, and you at no point see him doing anything to hurt others. Even the animal he at the beginning hunts to show it off to his friends, he doesn't kill, he just knocks it out. It shows a sense of friendliness and care more than most would have. The best part is that Stud is really just a kid, and you can tell that. He cries, he screams, and he's energetic and curious. He's a little odd goofball, but in that way where you can't help but to fall for it a little.
And again, they acknowledge that he is weird. This is important.
Besides Stud, we got Dan, the brains. He's a stumpy little fella with some sick-ass dreads. Dan is your typical calculated guy who doesn't show much emotion. You know, the type, the ones who correct their glasses and make that white shimmer go over the glass. Yeah, those. I was actually kind of a big fan of his introduction, cause you see him introduced with 2 other characters who just wrecks a whale's shit. And then you got Dan doing the most bombastic punch of all, and it doesn't do jack. It kinda establishes really early on that hey, Dan has a lot of brain but no muscle. I don't know, I just personally think this is an important thing to establish in a battle manga-ish fantasy comic. Anyway, beside this character archetype, there's not a lot to come for. Dan is calm, calculated, and acts professional in any and all scenarios. Though it's nice to see that when he's partnered up with Stud, the armor is kinda peeled off of him and we get to see him emote some more.
It's cool to see Stud's happy-go-lucky attitude affecting people around him in these nice and subtle ways.
The third and last character I want to talk about is this character here, and I hope some of you have the same issue that I had. If I hadn't told you that this was a different character from Dan, would you immediately be able to distinguish them? I couldn't until they both showed up on the same page. The hair, the face, and even the clothes for the most part is the same, and when you're first introduced to the character, she's slumped over, so you don't get a feeling of any height or body change. Of course, when you really look at her, her glasses are thinner, her hair is longer and braided in a different way, and you also start noticing the different nuances in her outfit. An outfit I really like, by the way. But she's introduced in an action scene, so you don't really pick up on that, I find.
It kinda added to my already present confusion, and I just kinda had to follow along until I found something that made a little sense to me.
Anyway, this is Diane, the commissioner of the Underwater Police, and can we just get a quick waifu stamp on... There we go. I love Diane. She's got her head solidly placed on her shoulders, but still overestimates her own abilities. She seems cold and seems to keep her brother Dan at an arm's reach, but you quickly find out why she's like this, and can immediately understand her motivations, and even if you don't necessarily agree with it, you can still understand it. I just really think that Jay hit the nail on the head. See, it's a Hammer reference. With Diane in terms of making her a big sister, cause she handles herself much more mature than the rest and has this protective nature, and seeing her interact with the already established weird goofball kid that is Stud, we see her put this big sister mentality for him as well. Heck, it's almost like she's more a big sister to him than she is for Dan.
I'm gonna do my best Linkara-esque here. It's almost like she's having trouble being Dan's sister.
Hammer provides you with a wide cast of characters, most of which are absolutely lovely and some are just interesting to follow. There are definitely character archetypes you'll recognize if you've ever read any shonen manga ever, but seeing that's the same kind of tone that Hammer tries to mimic, it's not that bad. I will say, however, that it is interesting when the characters kind of break out of the typical stereotype. The villains, on the other hand, kinda need some work, I find. The main villain we've been exposed to thus far is a big hammerhead shark called Steel, and he kinda flip-flops between your run-of-the-mill crook that spews one-liners and talks in a Brooklyn accent, and a wise philosopher of war. And I'm not saying he can't be both, but it more feels like he's either or, not both.
It felt a little like Jay didn't really know what he wanted. Did he want Sugar from Spider-Man? Bane from Batman? Or the main villain from Biker Mice from Mars? Yes, I have also forgotten his name.
The writing is a 6. The writing is okay, it's not really anything to write home about. It's interesting, it's shonen-y, but it often just feels like it's too much in a rush and kinda skips over stuff. The art is a 7. Jay's art has some definite problems in terms of presentation, but the sheer passion, care and love you can tell he puts into his art just makes it a joy to look through. The characters are a 6. They're lovely, but ultimately it really doesn't feel like I'm looking at characters as much as I'm looking at archetypes. I want to see them be their own characters more than those. Ultimately, the reading experience is a 7. Jay does a great job in immediately grabbing your interest and tell a story that goes and goes and goes, but it kinda loses steam here and there. I suggest you check it out either way, as it will definitely put a smile on your pretty face.
I promised Jay I would put this here at the end. Originally I read the comic on Webtoons, but you will now find the comic on a website known as SatAM. Or maybe it's SatAM, I don't know. but you will find a link to it in the description. And I really do think you should check it out, even despite its many, many flaws. I'll see you guys at next Webcomic Belief. Take care till next time.
For the bad times, when you're in love, when it's over, when I'm on fire, every good night, every last time, at least it's always saving my world, saving my soul, saving my girl, at least it's always saving my world, saving my soul, saving my girl.
Okay, yeah, it's been a while since I last uploaded a video, and I can only apologize. There's been a bunch of sickness. People promised they would edit my thing, then couldn't do that. Bunch of shit. So, I'm very, very, very sorry that it took so long. I got nothing. Like, this was never supposed to take that long. Thank you for watching the episode. There's gonna be a few news, I think, and then we'll go into the patrons. So, first of all, we are currently thinking of making another Webcomic Relief charity stream. We are thinking of doing it this summer, and we will return with a date when we are ready. Do go to the Webcomic Relief Discord and let me know if you guys want to join in as an artist or contribute in any other shape or fashion. We're going to be making it so, well, it's an idea that I've been thinking about, and I would love to hear you guys' thoughts about it, but I'm thinking of making it so that it's superhero themed. So it'll be something like superheroes summer charity stream or something like that. Use a lot of S's. So, if you guys have any ideas or thoughts, let me know. Oh wait, there is actually one thing. I mentioned it in my last Webcomic Relief stream. Thank you everyone for showing up for that one, by the way. And that is, there is a particular asshole. I don't know if I'm going to throw the screenshot up on screen here, but if I am, then you can see for yourself. Basically, don't fucking do this. I am not your attack dog. Don't go and threaten people with my show. That's not what the show is about. I'm not here to ruin people's lives or careers. I am here to review stuff. So don't fucking attack people and use me as a weapon of that. And if you watch my show, be respectful to the creators and artists and all that stuff. Unless they're tracers, then everything goes. But don't fucking do this. To you who did this, fuck you. Yeah, okay, I think that's it. Anyway, so into the patrons. We start out with Neo. Neo hasn't gotten back to me about anything he wants me to push, so I guess he doesn't want me to push anything. Just know that this guy's a huge OG. Nicholas Knudsen. Nicholas wants me to push the YouTuber Fredrik Knudsen, no relation, who I personally subscribe to too. The guy makes great documentary style videos on all sorts of internet oddities. Go check him out. Amocin. Amocin is working on a comic called Druids, which is a mature themed fantasy comic in the world of Warcraft. If you're interested in a more mature story from that world, go check it out. Hitori the artist. Hitori's laptop and PC are dying of old age, so Hitori is pulling money together both through his Patreon, but also through commissions. So if you want some awesome art and help a brother out, the link is in the description. Rojaru. Rojaru doesn't have anything he wants me to push this time, so for now he's just supporting the show, which makes him a huge OG. The Bonsai. Bonsai wants me to push his brother from another mother, I'm gonna butcher this, Konstantin Kolev. Aside from his art being absolutely amazing, he is also currently working on a yet unannounced project. So go check him out if you want to see what that may be. Jordan Burke. Jordan wants me to push a fellow fanfiction writer who's been making fanfiction for more than 10 years. He's just come back after a long hiatus to a dwindling fanbase, so let's fix that. Megan Smith. Megan is working on a webcomic called 8 World, which takes a completely different spin on the whole destined lovers trope. Trust me, you've never seen a romance quite like this. Rojaru-kun. Rojaru-kun is making an adult webcomic based around Zootopia called Hybrid Test. If you want some spicy furry stuff, go check it out. Shane Asher. Shane is working on a webcomic called The Strays. This comic tickles a personal fancy of mine, which is a superhero comic with anthropomorphic characters. It's a comic with a lot of charm, so check it out. Nana Newcomb. Nana is working on a mature superhero comic known as Blackbird / Miss Murder Daughters of Haven. If you want a more adult theme and really thought-provoking superhero comic, Nana has you covered. Angry and disillusioned, he quits graduate school and moves away to start over. Ironically, he finds someone from his past who he thought he'd never see again. While rebuilding their relationship, Max joins a band on a whim and begins chasing fame and fortune. In 2040's Denver, however, Max and his new friends face more than the usual sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Nate Tunes. Nate wants me to push his friend's Twitch channel as they are currently working on a fighting game called Super Psychic Royale as both the artist and animator. So check it out. You guys know how I like fighting games, so I'm gonna be checking this one out. And a huge shout out to Henry Volt, Sebastian Vanborg, Stacy Pitt, KH Raphael, Amy Comics, Kawhi Lee, Shiv, Scott Fraser, and Drieger in the Voxel Mine. And also a huge thank you to all the lovely people that you see right here. If you want to support the show, change my life and make it so I can live off of YouTube and entertaining people, please go to my Patreon. Here you can donate anything you want every month and you'll get a ton of awesome rewards for it. Just go to www.patreon.com/Riiser. You can also go to TeePublic and get your hands on some of the new webcomic relief merch. The link is in the description. If you don't want to support the show financially, at least think about liking the video, subscribing to the channel, or sharing your favorite webcomic relief episode with your friends. I'll see you guys at the next webcomic relief. Take care.